World War II, the Second World War, the war to end all wars, whatever you want to call it. The Second World War was the most deadliest and biggest war in history. 30 countries in total took part in it. An estimated 300 million saw combat throughout the fighting in Europe and Asia. Millions were involved in the war either through the factories producing the materials needed for the war, helping the sick and wounded soldiers, and the innocent civilians caught in the middle of the brutal fighting and oppression. In total, an estimated 75 million people lost their life. Around 20 to 25 million people on the battlefield, the rest innocent civilians. In the war, there were two sides who were fighting against each other. The Allied powers, mainly composed of the United States, England, and the Soviet Union, and the Axis powers, mainly composed of Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and Japan. So, how did we all get here? Well, grab your drinks and get comfy, because here is the story of World War II. The beginnings can be traced back to the end of the First World War. Italy found themselves on the victory side and were hoping for a big return. Instead, they got a lot less than they were expecting to get. This and a dreadful economy and a very weak government left the people a bit unhappy and allowed for a man by the name of Benito Mussolini to rise to power. Mussolini was a former socialist who worked in trade unions and wrote socialist newspapers advocating for his socialist ideas. He also wanted the monarchs in Europe to be overthrown. He was arrested for this and moved back to Italy after moving to Switzerland to avoid military service. He got kicked out of the Socialist Party after being pro-war during the First World War because he saw that the war could allow for the overthrow of European monarchs. After this, he founded his own party, which was called the National Fascist Party, which in simple terms means they ruled through force, through oppression, and controlled all the industry. He and his fascist ideas began to grow in Italy and was able to ascend to the prime minister position in 1922. There, he established a dictatorship with him as the dictator. Over in Germany, they had been on the losing side of the First World War and were hammered by the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty forced them to say they were responsible for all the damage done, paying an insane amount of money that wasn't paid off till 2010, over 90 years after the treaty was signed, lost territory, forced to get rid of their air force, and limit the amount of men in the army to just 100,000 people. This and a dreadful economy and leadership left the people unhappy and allowed for the rise of the most notorious and infamous dictator in history, Adolf Hitler. Hitler was a born member of the army in the First World War and was crazy patriotic. He was enraged at the humiliation of Germany because of the Treaty of Versailles. After a protest in 1923 where he was arrested, he and his Nazi party began to grow in Germany. In 1933, the president made him chancellor, and there, Hitler established a dictatorship with him as the dictator. Over in Japan, they had isolated themselves until they were forced to trade with the United States. They had no natural resources, so when they tried to get some, other countries did not allow it, so they could take it instead. This enraged Japan and went to war with Russia. To the surprise of everyone, they beat big, bad Mother Russia. A couple decades later, they staged a train to blow up and made it seem like it was China who did it, which gave them an excuse to invade China. All three countries believed they were superior to the others and felt hostility towards the Allies. A perfect reason for them to unite to each other. So they did. Hitler began to undo the Treaty of Versailles by beefing up his military and the Air Force. He wanted to increase the Aryan population, and to do that, he pretty much needed to take over the world. But first, he needed to take over a good chunk of Europe. The Allies began to get worried and had a strategy to appease them. When Germany said, "I'm going to take over that country," the Allies would simply say no. Germany did anyways, totally fine. They can have it, just as long as they don't do it again. This proved to be very effective at being ineffective. Europe either had its eyes towards Poland. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland with the help of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had recently signed a treaty with Germany to be allies. And would say that Germany would never invade the Soviets. And then France declared war on Germany, and Poland fell shortly after. After this, both sides kind of just sat around for a while in the phony wars. The French launched a small invasion but mostly took defensive positions. and didn't want to fire on the enemy. In a war, when they were launching a small invasion. Someone said they went home. The UK hoped that Germany would just end the war diplomatically. It didn't work. They ended up bombing the cities with propaganda leaflets, which was very effective at supplying the Germans with toilet paper throughout the war. Now, Germany's plan was very similar to theirs in the First War. Take over France, knock him out of the war, and then knock out the UK, and then turn on the Soviets. Hitler used a different strategy in this by using his Blitzkrieg strategy to surround the French army and take them over. After they took over their best army, the Germans breezed through the country after taking out Paris as well. Hitler did just a snap of the fingers what Germany could not accomplish in the First World War. They were very optimistic that the UK would just quit after the French fell. However, the UK showed no signs of quitting. Hitler needed to take over the UK. To do that, he needed to secure the English Channel. Bombing raids continued to pick up in England and the Channel. Eventually, the UK responded back with their own bombing raid in Berlin. While it didn't do much damage, it infuriated Hitler. So Hitler ordered the attacks to be refocused on London. This was a disaster as it allowed the airplanes to be repaired in the UK, able to fight with the Germans, and able to defeat them in this part of the war. This was pretty much Hitler saying, I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. As you will see in this war, is a recurring theme. There is still another country on the other side of the Atlantic, another country that was getting ready to intervene in the war. This would spell the doom with the Germans.